up, my wizards? It's Dev from SBMTG down there on the YouTube.com. You know by now. Today, budget deck. Because I know how much you like budget decks. Well, you know what's all the rage nowadays? Control. Ever since Pro Tour, Kaladesh, the two decks in the finals were both like these hardcore, old school, based around like draw go control decks. And so people are like, we can finally do this again. And a lot of people are pretty hype about control right now. The good news is that a lot of these control pieces are honestly not that expensive, you know. We play a ton of removal, and a lot of that removal is like uncommon, you know, it's not that big of an expense. And more in good news for budget players, we can cut a color safely here, I think, and save a lot of money on things like dual lands and stuff, you know, and still have a lot of good removal, card advantage, stuff like that that control decks care about the most. So let me show you what I've got here. This is blue-black control. Now I usually like to start decks with the creatures, but control decks I almost always start with the removal. I'm going to do that here too. We're going to start with 3 Deadweight, 4 Grasp of Darkness, and 3 Die Young here. Deadweight I really like right now against all the vehicles decks and stuff. You know, it takes out Thraben Inspector, takes out Toolcraft Exemplar. That's really important. And even though it doesn't outright kill an Inventor's Apprentice if they have an artifact out, it still doesn't let it crew things. You know, it has 0 power, so it can't even crew Smuggler's Copter. So Deadweight really good for just the 1 mana investment. Grasp of Darkness, I think it's just good instant speed removal. It didn't really show up to the Pro Tour, even though there was a Grixis deck. But I think because Grixis has like Galvanic Bombardment and a Harness Lightning, you know, I think it thinks it has better options than Grasp. But since we're only in blue and black here, Grasp is a perfect choice for us. Instant speed is very nice, especially against things like Smuggler's Copter. So I'm going to play the whole playset of this. I think it's still premium removal. As far as Die Young goes, it's probably the weakest of these 3 options, but we are playing a tertiary sort of energy theme here. And Die Young is one of the best pieces of that. You know, if we play either a Glimmer of Genius or a Live Fast before this, then we can usually take out like a 3 or 4 even toughness creature, and that's really, really good. So I don't mind playing Die Young. It's one of the better pieces of sort of the energy ensemble here. An honorary piece of removal in the deck is Transgress the Mind. You know, it doesn't affect the board or anything. It's not board removal, but it is like technically the most proactive removal in the format. So Transgress, I think, is still a really good piece right now. Here's our 3 mana removal here. We're still playing removal. There's like 20 removal pieces in the deck. But anyway, here they are. You see 2 copies of Murder, 2 copies of Ruinous Path, and 2 Flaying Tendrils. Ruinous Path also didn't show up too much to the Pro Tour, mostly because those decks are really focused around Torrential Gearhulk. And they want to play as many instants as possible. Of course, we can't play Torrential Gearhulk in this budget deck. 1 copy of Torrential Gearhulk actually costs more than this entire deck list right now. So if you've got your Torrentials, yeah, play them in this. But we're going to try and not have to build around that. Hence, we can play sorceries like Ruinous Path, and I actually think that Path is a little bit better right now than it was just a week or 2 ago, because if we start seeing more control because of the Pro Tour, then Ruinous Path gets better because we'll see sort of more Planeswalkers by default. So I think Ruinous Path is not too shabby right now. Murder is good just because it's instant speed. You know, instant speed is a high priority in a format full of vehicles. So this can also take out things like Smuggler's Copter and Fleetwheel Cruiser. Super important. Even like Cultivator's Caravan, you see that popping up in lists too. We're going to play 2 Flaying Tendrils here too, because it's really kind of the best mass removal that we can play, and it is still pretty good against these vehicle decks, and like the red-white tokens deck that we saw in the top 8 of the Pro Tour. That Flaying Tendrils is fantastic against that, because that deck is trying to kill by like turn 4 with a Reckless Bushwhacker and everything below Reckless Bushwhacker. So they have a pretty developed board on turn 3, and Flaying Tendrils can just like completely destroy them. So 2 main deck copies of Tendrils I think is very much warranted. And to finish off the removal here, I'm going to play another piece of pseudo-removal to top the curve. And that's 2 copies of Confiscation Coup, which is sort of the ultimate reason to play an energy theme here at all. And Confiscation Coup does give you 4 energy off the rip, which is enough to take care of most creatures. But I like that, like if you play, say, anything, really a Glimmer of Genius into a Confiscation Coup, then you can take it. You can get like a Torrential Gearhulk that way, or any of the Gearhulks. So Confiscation Coup, really nice. I like it actually most of the time. I like it better than actual removal. Getting to steal a creature is like getting to play another win condition. So at least a couple of copies of these, but I don't know that I'd go all the way. We're going to play a Planeswalker in the deck, at least one. I think we can afford it here and still stay pretty budget. Just one copy of Obnixilis in this deck because Obnixilis does everything. He's technically a win condition, but it's just we need a few of, we got to win the game somehow. And Obnixilis he can do that, especially against other control decks, which again I think may get a little bit more popular in this format here. So having tools against control decks in the mirror match is very important. And if you can resolve an Obnixilis, you're doing well, especially considering that at least the lists at the Pro Tour, control lists at the Pro Tour, didn't play too much main deck removal against Planeswalkers. So if you can stick one, it may have a chance of staying out there for a while. So Obnixilis will help you win the card advantage race. He's just straight up unconditional removal, which is good against pretty much anything. That's cool. And then that last ability, again, can win you the game. So at least one copy of Ob here. Into our card advantage suite, that's important to any control deck. We're going to play 2 copies of Live Fast and 4 copies of Glimmer of Genius here. And I was looking at other stuff like Anticipate and even Comparative Analysis, and I think they could find a place. But the deck list got really, really tight, and I feel like these 6 pieces are technically all we really need in this deck. But if you want to play Anticipate, knock yourself out. But I went with Live Fast here because it's also a pretty good piece in the energy theme. It feels like Read the Bones, or more accurately, sort of Painful Truths. The Grixis deck in the finals of the Pro Tour played a couple of copies of Painful Truths. And this is sort of our way of doing that in just 2 colors. Sort of we won't get to draw 3. But drawing 2 is nice, especially if we can get the 2 energy and then follow up with the Confiscation Coup a couple of turns later. So, card advantage is always nice. Something like Anticipate doesn't provide that, but Live Fast does. And, card advantage is very important to a control deck because we want a mid-game refill. And both of these cards do it, especially Glimmer of Genius. This really proved its worth also at the Pro Tour, really a breakout card there. And it's just an uncommon, it's still relatively affordable because it's a freaking uncommon. And just looking, scry 2 and then draw 2 is always extremely powerful. Plus we get 2 energy to back up a Confiscation Coup or a Die Young. So Glimmer of Genius is just so good right now. And instant speed is very important. Getting to play this at the end of your opponent's turn, or maybe very late in the game, you play it in response to one of their spells, looking for a Void Shatter. Many, many reasons to play Glimmer. It's just premier card advantage right now. On to the counter magic, something that's also obviously really important to at least blue-based control decks. We're playing 6 pieces of counter magic here to negate in the main deck. 3 copies of Void Shatter and 1 copy of Summary Dismissal. I have to bring it up again, the Grixis deck at the Pro Tour that won the whole freaking thing played 2 main deck copies of Negate, and I can definitely see why we're trying to beat Smuggler's Copter on turn 2, and this is pretty good at doing that, especially obviously if we're on the play. But it also does a lot of other things for us. Counters removal, counters card advantage from other control decks, counters artifacts, which is always really important, whether it's Aetherworks Marvel or Fleetwheel Cruiser. That's fantastic. So Negate, I think, definitely deserves a main deck slot. We're going to play a couple of those. Void Shatter is just fantastic, whether it's 3rd turn, beats a lot of good stuff in the format, especially, again, if we're on the play. So game 1, if we win the flip, then Void Shatter is fantastic. And it's great later on in the game and shuts out any sort of tricks they're trying to do in their graveyard. So Void Shatter, awesome. Summary Dismissal will play just the 1 copy of in the main deck and another in the board against Emrakul mostly. But Summary Dismissal is also just a great shutout counterspell late in the game. And we'll play 2 creatures in the main deck, and that's pretty much it. Just 2 copies of Sphinx of the Final Word. Something else that's really, really good in the control mirror, Sphinx of the Final Word can just kind of shut them out sometimes because they can't target it with removal or anything. They really don't have too many creatures bigger than it that can block it. Obviously, Torrential Gearhulk is a little bigger than this. It's 5/6. This is just a 5/5, but we can fly right over it and sometimes win the race against other control decks. Especially considering that we can just draw removal and kill their Gearhulk. They can't do that with our Sphinx. And once we take control of the board, Sphinx is even good against aggro and mid-range decks too. So I think right now this is maybe the best finish we can get, and it's only like $1, so let's play that. 25 lands in the main deck, and I'd really like to stretch this to 26. I just don't want to take anything out of the main deck, and since we're only 2 colors, I think we can swing 25 lands. I do too want to play this Gyreet Sanitarium. If we don't have anything else in our hand that allows us to draw cards, we want some advantage, we want to fish for something specific, then Gyreet can be pretty good, especially much later on in the game or at the end of the opponent's turn. I should also mention, you know, if you've got a couple of blue-black dual lands that are standard legal lying around, throw them in here, you know. Or if you got a couple of bucks, order you a few, you know. A little bit more consistency is always good in the control deck especially. But we definitely get by on this mana base. And here's the board right here. 4 Ceremonious Rejection is pretty much standard in blue decks right now, and you could actually, I think, safely put 1 in the main deck. And they're really, really good if you're on the draw against these decks that want to play Smuggler's Copter, because you'll almost be guaranteed to counter their Copter. There's another copy of Deadweight, and that's against all the, you know, really low to the ground aggro decks. Ditto Flaying Tendrils. We just want to kill all those decks that play a bunch of creatures within 3 turns. Summary Dismissal. Another copy of that against the Emrakul deck specifically. Negate, we're filling out the play set. Perpetual Timepiece is in the board in the mirror match against control decks. There are definitely times where games will go very long. Be prepared for that in the mirror match. And sometimes you just don't want to deck, and Timepiece can be very good as far as that's concerned. It can also get specific cards back, which can be extraordinarily powerful. Essence Extraction, good against Smuggler's Copter almost specifically, because we can take out Copter, add instant speed, and add life total equal to 1 attack step by the Copter, so that's good. And then I guess the last thing, Nobilis of Frost, which I saved for last here. Really, really good at the Pro Tour, 4 of in a sideboard there. And I could definitely see why, you know, the card is freaking good, especially with all of our instants and sorceries. We play almost exclusively spells in this deck, and Nobilis is a great tempo piece against these aggro decks, especially the vehicles decks, because we can play things at instant speed and tap stuff down with the Nobilis on their turn, which is always incredibly powerful. Here's your power rankings right here. A final score of 59, which is pretty good for a deck that's only going to cost you about $25 on TCG Player right now. Pretty good for a deck that plays pretty much almost all of the premier removal in the format. Has a good finish in the form of Sphinx of the Final Word. Great card advantage, something a control deck really, really wants, you know. We've got a great proactive discard piece in Transgress the Mind. Like, we play so many good cards in a budget deck that I felt the power was a 6 in a $25 deck, because it's just got all of the best stuff in the format that's not a huge creature, basically. So try this one out. Let me know how you feel. I feel like for 25 bucks, it's maybe the best budget deck that we've done in a really, really long time. Like, or maybe at least since the $35 green-red aggro energy deck a couple of weeks ago. I think that deck was fantastic too. This is easily the best deck since then, and it's $10 less. So give this one a shot. Let me know how you feel. I really think this is a contender for F&M. But that's all I've got for now. What are we doing next time? Next time, a deck that I'm actually pretty excited to present to you. It's a weird one too, you know. Instead of a budget control deck, it's a big daddy control deck. We're gonna do Naya Control next time. That is green, red, and white control. I actually think that there is a case for that in this meta right now specifically. It's got a lot of good answers. So basically a counterspell-less control deck in 3 colors that aren't usually known for it, except for maybe white. But stay tuned for that. I'm actually really working the kinks out of that, and it's looking really good right now. So I'm excited about it. So stay tuned. Do that. Do people still say stay tuned? Anyway, if you enjoy this content specifically, then you should like this content. It helps me more. Anything you can do, blah, blah, YouTube stuff, sub if you're new, you know, don't click away just yet. At least stay till the end of the video, because I love you guys. Anyway, I'm Dev from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Here's an end card